Not even God himself could sink this ship, that is what they said. They were so arrogant. They were so sure, but the ocean had a different plan. Today, we are going to tell the most famous story in history, and we are going to master the past tense. Welcome aboard. This is English Leap. The year was 1912. The place was Southampton, England. The Titanic was a monster. It was the biggest moving object made by human hands. It was fresh. It smelled like paint, new wood, and money. There were two worlds on the ship. The rich and the poor upstairs. The rich people drank champagne and ate caviar. Downstairs, the poor immigrants dreamed of a new life in America. Everyone was happy. Everyone felt safe. Why? Because the newspaper said it was unsinkable. Grammar stop. Let's look at that word. Unsinkable. It means cannot go down. It was a lie. A beautiful lie. 4 days later. April 14th. The night was freezing cold, the ocean was calm. Like a mirror. This was actually dangerous. Why? Because without waves, you cannot see the water breaking against the ice. High up in the crow's nest, two men were watching the dark. They didn't have binoculars. They only had their eyes. Suddenly, Frederick Fleet saw something. A black shadow. He rang the bell. Clang. 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 He picked up the phone and screamed 3 words, Iceberg, right ahead. The first officer, Murdoch, shouted, hard A starboard. Turn left. The massive ship began to turn. Slowly. Too slowly. It looked like they would miss it. The nose passed the ice, but then. Screech. A deep vibration went through the ship. The unsinkable was broken. For the first few minutes after the crash, there was a strange, terrifying silence. Most people on the upper decks didn't even feel the hit. They thought it was just a small vibration. Some people even picked up pieces of ice from the deck and started playing football with them. They were laughing. They had no idea that 10 meters below their feet, the ocean was rushing into the ship at a rate of 7 tons per second. This is the danger of a curiosity gap. What you don't see is often what kills you. Down in the boiler rooms, the reality was a nightmare. The workers were fighting a wall of freezing water. Captain Smith and the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, looked at the maps in the bridge. Andrews was a quiet man, but his face turned white. He looked at the captain and whispered the words no one wanted to hear. The ship has an hour, maybe 2. She is going to founder. It is a mathematical certainty. Imagine the weight of those words. The ship of dreams was now a clock of death. At 12:05 a.m., the order was given, abandon ship. This is where the true chaos began. But here is the mystery, why did the crew wait so long to tell the passengers? Why did the band keep playing cheerful music while the ship was tilting into the black water? Was it to stop the panic, or was it a fatal mistake? As the lifeboats were lowered, the air became the enemy. It was -2 degrees Celsius. The water was even colder. In the dark, the lights of the Titanic were still glowing, a golden ghost on a black sea. Women and children were screaming, husbands were saying goodbye, and the unsinkable ship was slowly pointing its nose toward the bottom of the world. But the biggest tragedy wasn't the iceberg, it was the empty seats in the lifeboats. Why were they leaving half full while 1,500 people were still on board? The story of the Titanic does not begin in the ocean. It begins in the noise and smoke of Belfast, Northern Ireland. It was 1909. The British Empire was the strongest power in the world, and they wanted to build a monument to their power. Imagine the sound of 15,000 Irish workers hammering steel. Clang. 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 They were building a beast. The Titanic was not just a ship, it was a floating city. It was 882 feet long. That is longer than the tallest building in the world at that time. It used 3 million rivets, metal pins, to hold it together. The designers, Harland and Wolff, believed they had conquered nature. They built 16 watertight compartments inside the hull. They said, even if 2 or 3 of these break, the ship will float. They were proud. Too proud. This brings us to a very important English idiom: pride comes before a fall. They were so focused on luxury and size that they forgot the most basic rule of the sea: respect the ocean. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic left Southampton, England. It was a beautiful spring day. On board, there was a strict class system. This was a mirror of British society in 1912. First class, these were the aristocrats, the industrial kings, the celebrities. A ticket here cost £870, which is $100,000 today. They had a gym, a swimming pool, and a Turkish bath. They ate off fine china plates and drank crystal champagne. They felt invincible. Third class, far below the waterline, there were the immigrants. Irish, British, Scandinavians. They were packed into small rooms with bunk beds. They didn't have a swimming pool. They had hope. They were going to America to start a new life. But there was a physical barrier between them. Locked gates separated the poor from the rich. In an emergency, these gates would become death traps. For 4 days, the voyage was perfect. The Atlantic Ocean was like a sheet of glass. But on Sunday, April 14th, the radio operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, started receiving messages. Ice ahead. Be careful of ice. Phillips and Bride were tired. They were busy sending happy birthday messages for the rich passengers. The radio was a toy for the wealthy, not just a safety tool. At 11 p.m., a loud message came from a nearby ship, the Californian. Say, old man, we are stopped and surrounded by ice. Jack Phillips was annoyed. The signal was too loud in his ears. He typed back, shut up. Shut up. I am busy. He silenced the warning. 1 hour later, the Titanic would be dying. This teaches us a tragic lesson. Communication is useless if no one is listening. When the iceberg hit at 11:40 p.m., there was no screaming. Not yet. The British crew reacted with what we call a stiff upper lip. This means to stay calm and hide your emotions in a crisis. Captain Smith knew the ship was sinking. But he didn't shout. He quietly gave orders. Women and children first. This is known as the Birkenhead drill. It is an old code of chivalry. The men, millionaires like Benjamin Guggenheim, put on their best evening suits. Guggenheim said, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen." They stood on the deck, smoking cigars, accepting their death. It was a horrifying, yet noble display of British manners. They preferred to die with dignity than to fight for a seat in a boat. As the panic started to grow, 8 men did something impossible. The band leader, Wallace Hartley, gathered his musicians. The deck was tilting. It was hard to stand up. The air was freezing, -2 degrees Celsius. Their fingers were numb, but they played. They played upbeat ragtime music to keep the passengers calm. They could have tried to save themselves. They could have rushed to the boats. But they chose to do their job until the very last second. Legend says their final song was "Nearer, My God, to Thee." Imagine that sound. The melody floating over the dark, screaming ocean. The music didn't save the ship, but it saved the souls of the people. It gave them a moment of peace in the middle of hell. At 2:20 a.m., the lights flickered and went out. The ship broke in two. The silence returned. In the lifeboats, 705 people sat shivering in the dark. They listened to the cries of 1,500 people in the water. Most of the people in the water didn't drown. They froze. Hypothermia stopped their hearts in minutes. The boats were not full. Boat number 7 had only 28 people, but it could carry 65. Why? Because the officers were afraid the boats would break. Because the passengers didn't believe the ship would really sink. Because of fear. When the rescue ship, the Carpathia, arrived at dawn, they found only silence and floating chairs. The Titanic was a lesson in arrogance. It taught the world that nature is always stronger than technology. And it taught the British Empire that even the biggest giants can fall.